In the name of the living God, who is Blessed Trinity. Amen. In 1955, the film version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical Oklahoma was revealed or released. And I don't mention this simply because I have a fondness from Oklahoma, but I really always liked this musical. Fun songs throughout. It was an enjoyable story. Remembering, if you watch this movie, though, if you ever see mountains in the landscape of Oklahoma, you need to remember where you saw them, because the film seems to reverse it. I think it was actually filmed in Arizona. But all these stories, a subplot in the story Oklahoma is this conflict, this ongoing conflict between the cowboys and the ranchers. I mean, the farmers and the ranchers. And back and forth it goes. And towards the end of the movie is this long song, the cowboy and the farmer should be friends. And there's this fight between them, and the matriarch of the whole movie sets them straight and says, there should be no fighting. This is a party. We're going to act like you should act at a party. And the subplot being that with the desire that Oklahoma be granted statehood, this new state would actually require both. That those that only wanted to make their living as a rancher, wanting the freedom to have open range so the cattle could move from here to there, and thinking that the farmers, the ones that wanted to set up fences to protect their crops and raise animals there on the farm, both groups thinking that the other was suspicious and maybe even the enemy to their way of life. And this song, this movie, I think, towards the end, in a laughingly joyful way, kind of reveals that they're not enemies, but they actually need to learn how to live together and act as if they need each other. Meaning their vision, the boxes they had set up to understand life. Like if everything happens inside this box, we're okay because we can control that box. That box for them was shattered. Now, all of this is kind of a half-hearted story to keep in mind. But today we celebrate the Epiphany, the revealing of Jesus to the Magi. And in Matthew's gospel story that we just heard, there's some characters mentioned. There's the wise men from the east, traditionally called the Magi. There's King Herod. There's baby Jesus, newborn king. There's Mary, the devoted mother. And all of these characters fill in this story. We've been living with them since Christmas. The wise men, the Magi, have this sense that this is a new king. We want to offer gifts. We want to pay homage. We want to worship this newborn king. Now we get to feel, as we're reading this story in the audience, if we were seeing this play, this as a drama played out before us on a stage, we see this character of Herod. Somehow he learns and says, well, when you find out where this baby is, let me know, because I want to go worship the newborn king as well. But us in the audience, reading this story, knows there's something happening besides just Herod's words. He doesn't really want to know where the baby is in order to worship. Because what we know and what is remembered on December 28th is the Holy Innocents. what Herod unleashes, the killing of all the newborns in order to be rid of this so-called threat to his throne. And so this is the story that we celebrate today, the Epiphany. That in one is the revealing of Jesus to the Magi. And Jesus as the light that shines out into the world, drawing the Magi on their journey to him. Now, this would be a simple enough story if we could just walk away from it now. But when we sit up with it and we let it soak into us and not rush through because, hey, this is the stories we always read on January 6th. And mark your calendars. January 6th of 2020, we're going to read these same stories again. But we're reminded, because the implications first of Jesus being revealed to the Magi reminds us that God's dream, God's vision for the world was not to be contained inside a nice, neat little box. The place only Jesus came from. But God's message of love and grace was to shatter that box, that the Magi, the first Gentiles that come to see Jesus, show us that God's love is meant to go throughout the world. And those of us that might have lived with it so long that we begin holding on to God's grace and God's mercy as if somehow we deserved him and others are undeserving. Or somehow we think they're our own private treasure, and so we close the doors and have our own private little party with only those that we like or seem to be like us. That the Epiphany reminds us that that box, that door, the way we think life should always work, was shattered. That the Magi are welcomed in. That all those that we encounter in life, it doesn't matter where they come from, what they sound like, what their heritage is. God's love is open to all. And the star of Jesus, the light that radiates out, means that as Jesus followers, our life is meant to be the hands, the feet, the faces of Jesus. So that through our lives, the light of God radiates throughout the world. So wherever we find ourselves, whoever we encounter, whoever the other is, the light of Jesus is the calling that we no longer look at someone as stranger, but look at them through the eyes of God. That all of us are beloved children of God. And as the boxes are shattered, as these Gentile Magi are not only welcomed in, they actually teach us what worship looks like. They're the ones that fell down in honor and in homage to this newborn king. That may we never forget that as we go through life and we all have our routines, we know what we like to do. We could probably draw a map of this nave and write in where you sit. And heaven help us if we ever sit in someone else's seat, because the whole thing may fall apart. But we all have our routine. We know what we like. We know what works for us. And as we go through life, though, in our routines, may we never forget that God always retains the ability to do something new. God always retains the ability to teach us something about faith and life from a surprising place. The Magi from the east teaches us what worship looks like. Barriers and boundaries and boxes, when we set those up, those don't come from God. And the light of Jesus that shines out, that draws people. The Gospel of John teaches us that the light shines in the darkness. And the world is not always going to receive the light. Just because the light shines doesn't mean it's always appreciated. Remember that very first moment of the day when you wake up from sleep and that first light gets turned on and it feels so rude. The light shines in the darkness. The darkness does not always welcome the light. But God's story of love throughout the world reminds us that even though the darkness will not always welcome the light, the darkness will never overcome the light. So happy Epiphany. Welcome the love of God wherever it comes, especially in the most surprising of ways. And as you receive the love of God, be that light out in the world. That whoever you meet, wherever you go, whomever you come in contact with, they might know the love of God by meeting you.